E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buonasera a tutti.
Good evening, everybody. So good evening to all of you in person and to all the people who are connected from remote. So I have the pleasure to be here for this conference devoted to Karen Hatleberg exhibition, River's Dream. But before that, I'd like to thank some people. First of all, I want to thank the meeting because this year too decided to bet on photography and specifically on a photographic genre that is hard to see around. So this is a sign of great esteem vis-a-vis the audience. Then I thank Kim Barnes, Janice Guy from the High Pictures Gallery from New York. Without them, this exhibition would have not been possible. And I also thank Tommaso Campiotti, architect, who was extremely good at designing the perfect place to host Atterberg's work. And then I am extremely grateful to all the voluntary workers that worked so hard to somehow set up the exhibition. And so thank you very much also for guiding the visitors through the exhibition. But now, allow me to introduce to you directly from Baltimore, Maryland, the amazing Karen Hatleberg. A round of applause for you. Some of you already met him. Many of you will come across him over the next few days. He will be with us until Friday evening. But we have another friend, another American friend, who just woke up because he lives in Oakland, California. So 9 years of time gap. His name is Paul Sheik. He's the founder and director of TBW Books. He's the editor of River's Dream. Hello, Paul. Hello. Good morning. You just woke up, isn't it?
a while, but yes.
Di mattina qui, quindi in realtà sono svelo già da un po'.
Ah, ok, ottimo, ottimo, sei un early.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. So I asked Karen to deliver a short speech to get to know him better and get to know his work better. But I mean, it surprised me because he wrote an amazing text who is about to read. So I will shut up and give him the floor. Karen, the floor is yours.
Possiamo avere
Can everybody see the image? Or?
possiamo vedere le immagini sul grande schermo? Ecco, vai.
Thank you.
Karen.
Outside the window, the sun is going down. I sit in a double-wide trailer. I'm heading back east, but can't seem to stay on track. It's a makeshift bar someone built in their living room. Christmas lights hang everywhere, floor to ceiling. I don't know where I am. I'm going nowhere in particular. A man I just met asked to borrow my car, the van. He says he's always wanted to drive a Honda Odyssey. It has a trailer attached to it, containing everything I own. Without thinking, I say, okay.
Slow down.
Everyone in the bar stumbles out into the dusty parking lot to check out the van. It doesn't seem like such a big deal to me, but everyone seems interested. I throw him the keys, then we watch him drive away. We stand there swaying, watching the red taillights of the trailer until they disappear out of view into the darkness. I realize I hadn't even asked the guy's name. Everyone stood still, silent now, watching the spot on the horizon where the car was last visible, even though there was nothing left to see. We all go back inside and order fresh drinks. I wait. 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours go by. People are laughing. I can't tell if they're laughing with me or at me. I wake the next morning in the passenger seat of the van. An oppressive sun is beating down. The door of the bar is locked tight. In a daze, I rummage around inside the van. Nothing missing, nothing out of place. The tank is full. He hadn't touched anything. In a sense, this is the origin story of my photographic process. This is how I always begin. I surrender my entire life to someone else, letting them take the wheel. When I'm working, I say yes to everything to see what happens. When I'm photographing, I agree to almost every single thing. My work depends on it. Chance is the methodology of my entire practice. Conceptual intention and forethought feel meaningless in the face of lived experience, steered as much by luck as chaos. So much of my work is about getting lost, waiting to meet people, building trust, and establishing friendships. At the beginning of a project, I don't have any plan at all. There's no way of knowing where I'll go or whom I'll meet. I let chance and intuition take me to a place I would never go otherwise. There's no pre-existing agenda involved, just the pull of the moment until something grabs my attention and snaps my brain into focus. I don't choose what kind of story it is or what's going to happen, but when the door opens up, I go all the way in. I rely on my subjects to direct and shape the moments I will record. I could never guess where they might take me, who they might show me, or what they might choose to reveal of themselves. In the company of strangers, I wait for a picture without knowing what it will be or when it will show itself. I never know what's going to happen until it's already underway. I remember an old woman who generously shared her house with me for a few nights. "It's dangerous out there," she warned, gesturing vaguely toward town. "You best stay here a while." She was an incredible cook, and she fed me like I was her son. It seemed she was always cooking up a feast for a guest who never arrived. One night, we ate spaghetti on paper plates in front of the TV. When a strong wind blasted into the room, she fired a pistol out the door into the night. I didn't even know she had a gun. She never mentioned it. One of the shots missed the open door and left a ragged hole in the wood paneling. The rain poured in. A dog somewhere began howling. Gun still raised, she rocked out of her recliner gently as if nothing had happened and closed the open door against the storm. This time, she made sure the latch was drawn tight. Turning to me, smiling, she warmly insisted I have a second helping of spaghetti and took my plate to the kitchen, handing me the remote on the way. My work relies on personal connection, human exchange, and mutual collaboration. Without shared interest, vulnerability, and trust, the photographs cannot be made or even begin. I only ever photograph and spend time with people who are as interested in the process as I am. I meet people by chance, and we get to know each other. People are complex. They have the ability to be both entirely predictable, but also wildly unpredictable. Stereotypes and preconceptions shortchange the complicated reality of who a person is. And the best way to override these biases is through direct experience. In these divisive times, how can one create a shift in deeply rooted attitudes and hardline positions, if not through experiences with others that show us how to imagine other possibilities? Photographs of people can force an interest in lives other than our own. When this works, we feel ourselves reflected in someone else, removing indifference. I believe it's only through others that we will understand our country, our current moment, our collective experience, and ourselves. Some relationships last 5 minutes without any attachment beyond the passing experience, though many individuals and families I get to know over months or even years. It's actually somewhat rare that people say yes and invite me into their life. This is often because they have something they want to share. They too are looking for something. I have built my life around spending time with people in places that are unknown to me. In the company of strangers, I learned things I couldn't have expected. One of the great pleasures of photographing people is in not knowing what's going to happen. A man raised in the bayou outside of town took it upon himself to show me around. He told me he should be the mayor. He loved his city deeply. We tried planting a community garden in a vacant lot across the street from his shotgun shack, but the seeds wouldn't take in the poisoned ground. We found a mud-splattered dog down a roadside ditch in a nest of swamp grass and garbage. A mother nursing 4 pups. All their eyes were stuck shut and they shivered. We took them home from the cold and washed them in the sink, then dried them with paper towels one by one. The worried mother only bit him once. He kept her and he gave the rest away. Over the months, we got to know each other better, and one night, he asked me to drive him somewhere, to a place he knew, not far away. On a desolate street in the darkness, he climbed over a wall with an empty sack, and when he came back into view, the bag was bulging. He was running now. Two shirtless men were on his tail, yelling after him. Panting, he hurried me to start the truck to drive him away. The men caught up and struck the front headlight with a pipe, shattering it to pieces. Peeling out at breakneck speed, we almost ran them over. When we got home, I asked what was in the sack. Opening the bag, I saw it was filled with lemons, 100 yellow lemons, as if there could have been anything else inside. I tried to photograph those lemons all night. I tried to photograph the man. I tried to photograph the man with the lemons, and I came up short every time. I guess some experiences are pictures, some are just stories. Photography involves a lot of failing. Failure is the standard of the medium. It's the continual, repetitive outcome until something miraculously works. Even a great photograph is only ever a weak approximation of the vivid complexity and mystery of life. But it is exactly this that most attracts me and informs my work. People often ask me if I'm a road photographer, but I could not feel farther from that history. The fallacy of the lone genius, bending the world to their will, grounds the myth of the road. Instead, I feel humbled by my own insignificance, moved by the sheer number of people involved in my practice, and inspired by the collaborative nature of my work. The farthest thing from a singular, all-controlling artist, I am constantly leveled by how little control I have over the work. I am at the mercy of chance, of weather, and of strangers' kindness and generosity. My work is not about the road, the places I find, or the journeys I take, but about the people. It is not about me, but about them. They are not subjects, but collaborators. The fundamental nature of the work is collaborative. How people and I work together, build trust, challenge each other, and affirm one another. Together, we uncover stories about our shared country. Sometimes weeks go by waiting for a picture or inspiration to materialize. The heat in Florida is insistent. It will not be ignored. The air is as thick as jelly, and in the humidity, the vegetation grows unruly, enclosing the world in a wet green light. As I searched for contact and connection, few people lingered outside, most preferring to sit indoors with the air conditioner running, separated from the world. To find people at last was like stumbling into a mirage. All along the street, families were sitting and drinking, laughing and eating in front of their homes. It was probably 100 degrees, but no one seemed to notice. It didn't take long to gravitate towards the domino table. Having never played myself, an old woman stood next to me, pointing out the strategies and intricacies of the game. Sometimes she got distracted. She kept splashing moonshine into my cup and onto the ground. Her main point was that the playing of dominoes had to be performed in an exact manner of cocky showmanship. I lost my first games badly, and it took some time to settle in, but by the end of the evening, I was slamming down each tile in arrogant victory. Winning or losing didn't really matter as long as you had the right bravado. We played and played, so long that the streetlights came on. Insects were audible now, screaming out from the hidden swamps in violent celebration. Mixed with yelling and laughter, the sound was a deafening ruckus, siphoned straight into my head, a constant flow from an endless source. At its heart, I believe my work is about trying to understand what family and community mean. So many times in my own life, I've been lost or adrift, searching for connection and love the way that we all do. And it's not an exaggeration to say the people I spend time with and photograph are and have been family to me. I've lived with many of my subjects and collaborators, eaten with them, worked with them, performed tasks and chores with them. In the company of people, life is affirming and better. Ultimately, I believe the photographs are traces of this, of something deeper and more important than I can ever construct alone. I always suffer a withdrawal after returning home following an immersive trip. I try to brace for it, but can't avoid it. When I'm working, the world is a hallucination, and a transformation takes place. Things are said, sights are seen, meaningful relationships are built and shared, and I open up completely. I learn things I couldn't have prepared for. Often real and actual shared understanding is achieved, and miraculously, there's a feeling that we've given each other what we've wanted all along: companionship, reciprocity, care. When I'm there in the moment, I trick myself into thinking I have a limitless time and opportunity, but time runs out, and then it's time to leave on a separate path, and I'm alone again, left with memory and echoing conversations. Before I know it, I find myself back at home. All the revelations and stories and faces are fading rapidly from my awareness. Did it even happen? You can't live inside a hallucination very long. It's cliche, but the time spent with people is a privilege and sacred, and it ends fast, too fast. Then all you're left with is the realization that I may never sit at a person's table again and share a meal with them. I may never see that particular house again, or that specific body of water, or that face or family again. And if by some chance I do, it will only amount to a very few moments across an entire lifetime. And it will be totally different the next time, because they've changed and I have. As the writer Hernan Diaz has said, nothing left behind can ever be retrieved. Every encounter is final. It is impossible to return to anything or anyone. Whatever is out of sight is lost forever. When I close my eyes, I see people naturally flowing together. I see faces gathering, an endless parade of faces coming and going, laughing, touching, crashing into each other. Faces engaged in careless violence and sloppy embrace. Faces eager with love. Faces all excited to share something of their life with someone else. Faces desperate to make themselves understood, to discover what it is they want to say. All of them irresistible, all of them perfect. Thank you.
Grazie. Grazie davvero.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. I thought you are a great photographer, but you're also very good with words. Right, Paul, back to you. Who is Paul? Paul is a small but great publisher, editing just great books, photography books. And maybe we're not very much used to photography books. So I asked him to tell us more about his job. Why does he do it? And why does he have such a passion for high-quality photography books? So Paul, tell us more.
Thank you. First, I just want to say thank you to Luca and Curran for having me. Very honored to be here and to be able to have people listen and for me to be able to express what it is that I do and what I'm passionate about. So thank you for having me. Yeah, so as I'm sitting here listening to Curran, who's a dear friend of mine,
che è un caro amico,
I'm reminded that
mentre lo ascoltavo mi sono
Curran and I are both attempting to be
cerchiamo
poets more than we are
di esprimere
photographers or book publishers.
quello che siamo, fotografi,
It's important for me to feel like
per me è importante
I'm contributing
sentire di dare un
to
contributo
art,
all'arte
and being a poet and being sincere.
essere sincero, quasi un poeta.
I'm not so interested in the technical side of things, although I have to
L'aspetto
run a business and I have to know how all the machines work
devo anche
in order to print the best books possible.
devo cercare di stampare i migliori
But
libri possibili.
in the end, what's important, and Curran and I speak about this often,
Conta di più e
is making
spesso
the best possible book
nel pubblicare il
using the best possible tools,
con gli strumenti migliori
because
a disposizione,
these
poiché
books will outlast us.
questi libri sono
They are important documents of not only our time here
documenti importanti
on this earth,
non solo del nostro passaggio,
but how we chose to spend our time.
ma del modo in cui noi abbiamo scelto
So,
di trascorrere il nostro tempo.
really briefly, I'd like to just go over a couple things.
Vorrei adesso illustrarvi
I am a book publisher, but I began as an artist.
un editore, ma ho cominciato
I studied photography and I
ho mosso i primi passi nella fotografia,
became extremely passionate about photography.
mi sono appassionato
Later
della fotografia.
in my life, I'm 46 now, but I began
6 anni, ma
really getting interested
ho davvero
in photography
più un interesse per
later in my 20s
verso
when I began studying photography at university
prima dei 30 anni
in California. I'm originally from
all'università. Io
the middle of America, Wisconsin.
sono del Wisconsin,
It's where I grew up.
sono cresciuto lì.
And in my late teens, I moved to
Già verso
California,
l'adolescenza, poi sono
specifically Oakland, California.
stato in California e mi sono trasferito.
But because I was an artist before I was a publisher,
Ecco, sono
I understand the needs of artists.
editore
And I try my best to be a publisher
che sin
that I wish was available to me
cercato di essere un editore
when I was
in ascolto degli
an artist. I try to be of service to artists
cercato di
that I
mettere
work
al
with.
servizio degli artisti con cui lavoro,
I try to be of service to the work,
cercato di mettere al servizio
and hopefully in some small way in service to the world.
un piccolo contributo anche per mettendone al servizio.
The company I run is called TBW Books,
La mia azienda si chiama
and it's, again, based in Oakland, California.
e appunto
Oakland, California is a working class town, has a long history,
operaia.
a beautiful history. It's always lived in the shadow of the fancy San Francisco.
Vissuto all'ombra della più modaiola e conosciuta,
And in that working class,
ma è una
in that suffering,
con un passato anche di
there's a lot of beauty to be found.
anche di grande
And I hope that the company I run is a reflection
che anche la mia società, la mia casa
of the beauty that comes out of that hardship.
quindi questa bellezza, questa gioia
I've been publishing now for 20 years,
della sofferenza
although the first 10 years were essentially just learning and trying and failing.
che ho imparato
I didn't study bookmaking.
e ho studiato anche
I simply
l'editoria,
looked at passionately studying, learning, seeing what materials were used,
il lavoro in questo settore, concentrato
imitating and manipulating
sugli ari delle tecniche, anche copiando
what I saw in other books
in altri
to create a company that
e ho cercato poi
is hopefully unique.
la mia casa editrice cercando di creare qualcosa
I'm very proud that
sono molto
I've published over 130 books.
fatto che ho
I employ 6 people.
più di 130 libri,
We print a minimum of 10 books a year.
di solito pubblichiamo almeno 10
I like to think of bookmaking as almost a sacred act.
alla realizzazione di un libro come
These books we make,
i libri che realizziamo
they outlast us.
sicuramente ci
They will be here in some form
dureranno nel
after we leave.
e anche quando ce ne saremo andati
My children, Curran's children,
i miei figli,
They have to be proud of what we make.
devono essere orgogliosi di quello che facciamo.
So while some of the books might be fun
Alcuni libri
and funny,
sono divertenti,
they ultimately have to be in service
in generale è importante che questi libri
of the poetry that we're trying to make out of our lives.
quindi della poesia che
I do everything I can to make the best books that I can.
quindi cerco di fare
That doesn't always mean
possibile con quello che
the most expensive
e non sempre
or the fanciest.
significa fare libri
It means what is the best book
o molto sofisticati.
for what my intention is.
Il libro migliore rispetto
What is the best format and style
quindi cerco di scegliere il formato e lo stile
to represent the artist's vision?
presentare al meglio la visione dell'artista.
I do all I can to not allow time constraints or market demands or money constraints dictate what the book should be.
O anche di alcuni vincoli formali.
I want the book to be what the book wants to be.
Il libro diventi quello che lui stesso
We participate in book fairs all over the world.
partecipiamo a fiere del libro in tutto il mondo.
I show the work of established artists like Jeff Wall and Wolfgang Tillmans,
Rappresento
but we also pride ourselves on publishing the books of underserved
anche libri
and underrepresented artists
artisti che non sono
like Alice Wong and Carla Williams.
come Mary Trevor, come Carlo Williams e Alex Wong.
The book as an object and as a format and a way of disseminating work out into the world is struggling to stay alive.
Appunto far conoscere
My opinion is that it's the perfect vessel for art.
davvero fa
It's in many ways an egalitarian way of viewing artwork outside of the confines of
estremamente
museums,
conoscere l'arte, al di là dei musei,
galleries,
delle gallerie
and capitalism.
e anche del capitalismo.
Books to me are a personal reprieve
Secondo me
from the
sono
tech world
quasi una sorta di nicchia
that is working so diligently to consume our every breath
che
and our every minute.
ci consentono di trovare
Books are, again, sort of this sacred space
uno spazio sacro
that allow one individual
respirare,
on their own time and their own space
che ciascuno anche
to
può utilizzare secondo i propri
interact
tempi, i propri spazi
with art.
e sono uno strumento con cui interagire con l'arte.
Okay. Oh, you've been cycling through here. Okay, could we go back to the first slide? Sorry, the first slide is the pink book.
Alla prima slide, per favore, quella con il libro con la copertina rosa.
Thank you.
Grazie.
This book is by Alice Wong.
Questo libro è di Alice Wong,
Alice Wong is an adult with disabilities. She works
una persona
at a studio here in Oakland, California
allo studio.
called Creative Growth. And Creative Growth is a very important place for me.
Questo è un luogo molto.
My wife is a hairdresser and she volunteers her time doing haircuts
Mia moglie
and styling for their annual benefit every year.
anche appunto facendo acconciature.
And Alice Wong is an artist that's worked there for 15 years, and she paints
Oramai è
on top of vintage photographs.
anni e fa queste opere
So it was really important to me that at some point I was able to do a project with Creative Growth.
di
And this book was a book that we did a few years ago with Alice Wong. And I'm very proud of this book.
e sono estremamente orgogliosa.
Next slide, please.
La prossima slide, per favore.
So as you can see there on the right, Alice takes found photographs,
Alice prende
vernacular photographs, photographs that
foto di quel
were never explicitly intended for art making. Maybe this is a press shot, a promotional photograph, and then she paints on top of them. I find them extremely beautiful.
creando qualcosa di
Next slide, please.
La prossima slide, per favore.
Next slide, please.
La prossima.
This represents, or this is a photograph from the very early days of how I made the books. I didn't have any money, and in those days I had more time than money, and so I would hand collate the books myself. So after they were printed, I would cut them down to size, and I would walk around this table, picking up one piece, putting it on top of the other, on top of the other, on top of the other, until you get to the end. And I would insert that orange slip sheet and then do it again. And this would take days and days and days. But it was really a foundation for the company that I wanted to see in the future. Next slide, please. As time goes on, you level up, and eventually I had some friends that were helping me, and this represents moving into a stage of bookmaking where we had a little bit more resources. Next slide, please. This is a huge shift for me moving to Heidelberg printing presses. This is actually working with Wolfgang Tillmans on a book that we did together. Next slide, please. I should mention that that was a huge milestone for me, as Wolfgang was probably the artist that I was most looking at as a contemporary photographer / artist, an artist. I don't think he would identify as a photographer, but you know, I was studying his work very deeply while I was a student. So to finally get to publish him and work with him directly was a huge milestone for me. Next slide, please. And this is more recently. This is printing in Italy, in Verona, at Trifolio, under the supervision of the master printer, Massimo Tonoli. When I look at the books that were most important to me, and some of the books that I thought were printed exquisitely, they a lot of times were printed at Trifolio with Massimo. So I was insistent that that was the height, the pinnacle of where I wanted to be producing books. So I worked diligently to get to that point. Next slide, please. This is Curran and a brilliant pre-press technician and friend of ours, Hayward Hart, who's in LA, working on the files and printing at Trifolio. Next slide, please. This is after work, some of the best spaghetti and clams I've ever had. I think we went here on occasion 2 times a day to eat this spaghetti and clams. To say I'm in love with Italy is an understatement. I love Italy. Next slide, please. That's the amount of paper that it takes to create a book, or specifically the book River's Dream that we printed with Curran. Whenever I see raw materials like this, I'm humbled. I'm reminded of the house that I grew up in, which wasn't that much bigger than that pile of paper there. I think that pile of paper cost more than the house I grew up in, and so I'm always fascinated by the industrial side of bookmaking, and I'm always impressed by where we've gotten the company to at this point. Next slide, please.
Mi fa capire tutta la strada che ho fatto fino ad ora. La prossima?
I believe this was the last form that we printed with Curran for his book.
Qui fossimo nelle fasi finali
Next
della
slide.
realizzazione di Woody Karen. La prossima, per favore. Grazie.
And then this is some of the books arriving back at our facility in Oakland. I think as Americans, it's ingrained in our blood to conquer, for better or worse. And I feel like this need to always stand atop our successes. I think this is a funny photo. Next slide, please. A recent book that we've released, which is a book that's near and dear to my heart, is Tender by Carla Williams. They're self-portraits that are made in the 80s and 90s, never shown to anybody. Lived under the artist's bed in New Orleans in boxes. I spent years editing and sequencing and working with the artist to create this body of work. They're all self-portraits. Next slide.
Queste opere. La prossima?
They represent a perspective from an African-American woman very, very early in the stages of becoming an artist. I believe she's not much more than 20 years old here. They were made in seclusion and solitude in her bedroom, and they represent to me sort of the poetry and the greatness with which photography can be utilized. Next slide. You can go through these next slides all together, please.
Se possiamo vedere le prossime, tutte in sequenza, per favore, grazie.
This book was also printed at Trifolio,
Anche questo libro
and I was fortunate enough to spend a week there
e ho avuto la fortuna di poter rimanere una
with them and with Carla.
e anche insieme a Williams, l'artista.
And it's a book I'm extremely proud of and will forever hold close to my heart.
Che mi rimarrà sempre estremamente caro.
Next slide, please.
La prossima?
Another book that I did a
L'altro libro che ho pubblicato
few years back was by Gus Powell, and I know that he was also shown with you all
e credo che vi sia
not too long ago, maybe last year, 2 years ago.
ha fatto la mostra.
The book is called Family Car Trouble, and it's essentially a meditation, a poetic response to this idea of
Una riflessione poetica
the evolution of family through birth and death, the birth and life of his young daughters, and the death of his father.
e quindi riguardando la
And it's all sort of seen through this narrative of a classic novel. And so the format of the book really becomes a sculptural container for
un contenitore
the idea of a intimate novel that you would read. So the size and the formatting of the book is actually structured as such. Next slide, please.
La prossima?
So you can see right off the bat through the sequencing and the design of the book, you know, we're lyrically allowed to make comparisons and contrasts between young and old, and then this family car, this Volvo. that just breaks down, gets fixed, breaks down, gets fixed. So clearly a metaphor for our own personal lives.
E quindi l'auto che diventa una metafora della nostra vita personale, di tutto quello che andiamo
Next slide, please.
La prossima.
And then lastly, I'll just quickly speak on the format and size and scale and ideas behind working with Curran to create River's Dream. Next slide, please.
Fatto per lavorare insieme a Curran su River's Dream. La prossima.
So River's Dream is, I guess you'd call it an oversized book format. There's no writing on the cover. There's just this brilliant marbled paper that was created specifically for this project by a paper marbler. This slide here is the quote-unquote limited edition of the book that comes in a slipcase. We did it in two colorways. We were fortunate enough to have to reprint the book. So the original printing is in red. You can see the red edging. And then the second edition is in blue to distinguish it a little bit. Next slide, please. The title page of the book is, everything from the font to the typesetting to the design is extremely thought out, and nothing is arbitrary. It's always completely thought out. And one thing I think about often is, what is the simplest solution for maximum effect when creating these books? I never want something to feel over-designed. I never want something to feel under-designed. There's that sweet spot. And again, all of it is in service to the artist and the work that the artist has made. I believe that's the last slide. Am I right or wrong? Just to show you the vibrancy of the color red that is sort of the driving force of the reds that are constantly being evoked throughout the sequence of the book. As you're going through, this red keeps coming up. And it's hard for me not to think of red as in the form of blood, often associated with violence, but also associated with life itself. And so the duality is something that I'm always kind of playing with when thinking about presentation of books. I never want a book to explain it all. I always want there to be room for thought and contemplation within these books. Next slide. That's it. That's it. Thank you.
Questo è tutto, grazie mille per l'attenzione.
Grazie Paul.
Thank you, Paul. That's really fascinating to see the passion that you put into the things that you do. I have tried in any way to bring a third edition for the meeting, but there was no way to get that. That's the artwork, and we'll see. Yet, they told me they will be back in Milan. They go to Massimo Tonoli to reprint the first book by Curran, that is Lost Coast. So maybe for those who didn't see it before, they will be able to do that. I'd like to go back to Karen, back to the beginning, because you traveled for 10 years and you went back many, many times to the southeast of the States, and you started with Florida. So my question is, why at that time and why from Florida?
Yeah, so the project began in Florida for a lot of reasons. For one, I had a great love and appreciation for Southern literature. So a lot of these classic, famous novels are set in the Deep South. So in this particular region, also movies that I adore and have spent a lot of time with. So in a way, it was going there to either validate or dispel the myth that I had in my own head about these places. Another important reason was that a dear friend tragically and unexpectedly lost his life in Florida, and part of me going there was attempting to understand what happened to him. So I wanted to be in the place where he last was. Finally, I think, you know, geographically, the U.S. is gigantic, and we are a country of many multicultural influence. So it was interesting to think that while I'm a resident of the U.S., I'm a citizen of the U.S., there are many places in which I'm almost a foreigner or don't fully understand the culture. So it was in part trying to let go of what I knew in order to make way for something else that was more interesting to me, what I didn't know. So to kind of run towards that, to try to understand.
Paul, volevo chiedere.
Thank you. And Paul, I wanted to ask you a question. When you received all this material from Karen, what did you think? What was that convinced you that this project could be worth it?
I appreciate the question. I have to answer so honestly. You know, Curran and I have built a relationship throughout the years, one of trust. And I know that Curran, as I think is clear to everybody here now, you know, Curran is a brilliant photographer. He's one of the great photographers of our time. And what he does is so sincere and so honest and so painstakingly slow that by the time this work arrived to me, I had already done one other book with Curran. And I knew his working methodology, and I knew, more importantly, what kind of person Curran was. And I knew that whatever was coming my way was going to be good. Curran, I think you'll remember, we met at my friend's house in Brooklyn when we were overlapping on some travels. And I remember, and I must preface this, this is exactly the opposite of 99% of the books I do. But I remember looking at the work and actually being kind of amazed at how the book was already there. The majority of what I do as a publisher and what I love doing is working with artists to take what they've made and then create something new out of it and contribute something more to elevate the work into a book. This is done through design, conceptualization, help with titling the book, thinking about how it's presented on the page, what type of paper we use, why we would choose one paper over the other. what that paper means to the photographs, et cetera, et cetera. What that paper and that font choice and that color choice evoke in the viewer. And Curran had this project so dialed in that there wasn't much for me to do except support him and try to figure out the best way to get this book done and out into the world. So I knew early on that this book was great. And then it was just a matter of us following through diligently, doing all the steps and all the legwork to make sure that it was presented perfectly. But that's very rare. Most projects aren't like that. I'm not saying that the process was easy, but Curran is sort of representative of an artist that, from making the photos to editing to printing to presentation, and most importantly, the sequence of the images. Sequencing and editing, I think, is always 50% of the project. And Curran had already done the majority of that work, which is very rare when working with an artist. I oftentimes say, you can't expect someone to be brilliant twice, right? And in sports, the analogy would be, you can't expect a brilliant football player to also succeed at being a brilliant tennis player. And so in the photo world, brilliant photographers are rarely brilliant editors and sequencers. In Curran's case, there's a chance that he's both.
Grazie, grazie. Ma invece
Thank you. Let's go back to one of the things that most impressed me of your work, Karen, and about the motivations behind it. You say that you become aware of the situation in your country, of the great cultural and social polarization. And in your way, through your medium, which is photography, you try out a different approach. You want to try and find what you have in common rather than what divides you. So I would like to understand better, first of all, why do you feel this need? And what did you find in common in what seems to be a different planet with respect to the one where you were born and grown up?
Yeah, I think it's always in my mind that human beings are more similar than dissimilar, despite whatever difference may appear on the surface. So I think a lot of what I am interested in and what I pursue is a process in which you have to take risks and step out of your comfort zone in order to find a place of connection. So this is a process, I think, that reveals the deepest kind of learning, the most unexpected type of empathy, the deepest levels of understanding when you spend time with someone and get to know them, whether they appear to be dissimilar from you or people that are similar to you. It's just a process of growing together through developing a relationship. Yeah, this is where all the buried treasure of human experiences, I think. I should also add, before we move on, that Paul was sort of understating his role in the process of the book. I can't stress enough that this is not a singular act the whole way through. So to tie it back to your new question, I can't do anything without the collaboration of the people that I spend time with. Without them, without their mutual interest and curiosity about me, meeting my own curiosity about them, nothing can happen. There's no pictures. So from the point of taking the picture, it's entirely collaborative. Then to work with the gallery to present the work in an exhibition, to work with curators like yourself, to work with Paul, who trusts me, you know. It's all a process of growing together and compromise to arrive at something better. And that extends further to the pre-press that Hayward does, to the brilliant work that Massimo does here in Italy. So I can't stress enough how the entire way is about collaboration.
No, mi col-
That's very interesting to me because the title of this session is A Deep Immersion, Creating an Artwork Together. So the very idea of giving oneself to a project in which the quality of the pictures depends on the quality of relations. The more these relations are deep, the deeper these relations, human relations are, the more this can emerge from the pictures, from the photos. After all, there is always this circular relationship between subject and artist, collaborators, printer, editor. It is like the best things can be done together within a relationship, within a friendship. And I have to say that this strikes me a lot, just like the challenge launched by Karen, not just to his own country at this time, but also to our own country, because laziness pushes us to see what is different in the others only. Well, I don't really know how to say thank you to Karen for being here with us. I want to say thank you to Paul for joining us online. And I hope this can be the beginning of something great. And I have to mention something else before closing the session and saying goodbye. We have tried to convince the meeting to bring Paul to Italy too, but it was not possible because the meeting doesn't have endless resources. But just to do this, the session we have done, we need the help of everybody, not just the sponsors, but also of those who love the meeting and want these things to happen. You know very well that in the trade show center, there are stations where you can make donations. You know, you can have fiscal exemptions. So put one hand on your heart, one hand on your wallet, and think about the great exhibitions we can do with your help. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Karen. And see you to the next exhibition at the meeting. Thank you.
One last thing that I should have said at the beginning, but apologies. One last thing that I should have said at the beginning is just to express my gratitude and thanks for bringing my work to the meeting and to Italy. Thank you, Luca. Thank you, Paul. And thank you to everyone who made it happen. I'm very happy to be here, so thank you. Thank you.
La civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia? E allora si è voltato improvvisamente alla gente che era lì e ha detto: la gente che cosa dice che io sia? Chi dice che io sia? E voi chi dite che io sia?